Hello, welcome. So it is time for December wrap-up, so we will just get into it. I do have some housekeeping things at the end that hopefully I will remember to talk about, but the first book that I read in December was The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake, I believe. I just picked this up at random. I was at the store and they had a really good sale on paperbacks, and so I picked up a whole bunch, which is very out of character for me, but I was in a reading slump, so I had not heard really anything about this other than seeing the cover on Instagram a bit. But apparently this is a very, very big book talk book. So I'm very glad that I didn't know much about it because apparently the hype is massive and a lot of people who read it based on the hype are disappointed. I was not disappointed because I had no expectations whatsoever, and so this was a really, really fun read. This is dark academia, and with a little bit of fantasy in it. 6 people are selected to become part of the Alexandrian Society, which is something that saved the Library of Alexandria when it was supposedly destroyed, and they have been protecting it through the ages, and they only invite a certain amount of people, and they are magicians. It is a little bit long, like a little bit longer than it needs to be, I think, and it's not very deep. Definitely if you were expecting anything very impactful or important, this is not going to be it. The characters are very caricatured, like very over the top, but again, it was just really fun for me to read, but ultimately kind of an empty book. But I will be reading the sequel, which is already out, so I either need to get it from the library or wait until it comes out in paperback. On the complete other side of the spectrum, I next read The Twilight Zone by Nona Fernandez. This is a Chilean author. This is the story of it's a true story, a fictionalized account of a true story where a secret police officer who served under the Pinochet regime went into a journalist's office and confessed to all of his, atrocities that he had committed. And reading the description, I thought that this was later. I thought that he, after the Pinochet dictatorship had ended, gave all this information, but it was not. It's actually while it was happening. So he was very much, his life was under threat the whole time, really for the rest of his life, I think. So this is told through the lens of possibly the author, I'm not sure, but a documentarian who is making a documentary film much later, but she was also a child during this time, and so she has both personal memories and family stories and, memories of the media at the time that are kind of intermingling with these clips and excerpts and articles that she is compiling and editing as, the documentary of this story. And also, as if that's not enough, she is, weaving in a little bit The Twilight Zone. It was, a show that she watched as a child, and so some of them are kind of framed through episodes of The Twilight Zone and how weird it was and appalling to be living just a normal life as a child, and all of this stuff was happening just below the surface, and all of these ways that intersected, and how, it was just like stepping through into the Twilight Zone. So, loved this. One of my favorite books of the year for sure. And I highly, highly recommend it. I do own it in Spanish as well, so I will likely be rereading it in Spanish. Highly recommend. So this was later in the month, but we will talk about it at the same time. This is Space Invaders by the same author. This one was written first, and it is very tiny, and this is essentially the same story, but very different. So I kind of see this as a different perspective on the same story or a different, like a draft of the story. I did greatly prefer The Twilight Zone, but I still think that Space Invaders is worth the read. I would just read it after The Twilight Zone. I certainly was, Googling while I was reading it, but without knowing very much about the Pinochet dictatorship and the coup and everything, I was able to follow this book very well. This one, if I hadn't had just read The Twilight Zone, I don't think I would have really known what was happening, because this is told in fragments. It is basically the story of a classmate that they have, and it's the whole class basically telling you the story through lots of different pieces of information. It could be dreams or anecdotes or thoughts or feelings or memories. And so it's very, very fragmented, very not cohesive. And it is actually a character that appears. There are multiple characters that appear in The Twilight Zone as well. So anyway, I do recommend them both. I like The Twilight Zone better, and I would read The Twilight Zone first. Next up, I finished a reread of Jane Eyre. Not that you can see that. I listened to this in Spanish, and I love Jane Eyre. I really just find it such a compelling story, such great character development, and I just love it so much. So this is like mildly spoilery, so I will mark when it's not anymore. But it's very funny to me because most people I feel like who love Jane Eyre are like rooting for Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester to like end up together, and I'm definitely not. I have many, many thoughts on that relationship. To me, rereading this now, you could take out the big thing, like the thing, the big reason why he's like a terrible person in the book. You could take that out entirely, and he's still such a terrible person, such an awful human being, manipulative, abusive, gaslighting, like, oh my goodness. It was just so interesting because I was listening to it, and I'm like, this man is negging her. Like, the first time that they meet, properly, they're sitting in the drawing room or whatever, and he's like dissing her about everything, about her piano playing, about her art, about everything about her. He's straight up negging her. Like, it could be in a 2020 novel and everybody would say that about it. So it's just, for one thing, so horrible to me that people have been doing that men primarily have been doing that for apparently several hundred years, and we still haven't gotten them to stop. But yeah, just so many ways that he was just appalling, constantly playing with her emotions, constantly just treating her as so much less than a human being. And I love the book, but wow, appalling behavior. There's also quite a lot of racism in here as well that I definitely did not pick up on when I was younger. Then I listened to All Her Little Secrets by Wanda M. Morris. This is not really a thriller, kind of a mystery. So there are kind of multiple perspectives, or multiple timelines, I mean. So you are primarily following a successful corporate lawyer who is having an inappropriate relationship with her boss, and she is the only Black person at her company. They are a very stodgy old guard firm or whatever, and then kind of shit goes down at work and she becomes embroiled in this whole murder investigation, and she has to confront things from her past, and there's a lot going on, a lot. I did really, really enjoy this book. I thought that it had kind of a dragging section in the middle where they had started to build up all of these different, threads of the plot, but they hadn't really started to unroll yet. And so I felt like the pacing could have been a little bit better, but I did really, really like this, and I did immediately start listening to her other book, which I am still listening to now. So next I read Ciudades de Humo, which is a YA sci-fi romance written in Spanish. It was originally a Wattpad book, which I had not read anything from Wattpad before, and I may never again. No, I'm just kidding. It was okay. It was very something that I would have probably devoured when I was a teenager or like a preteen. This is a world in which androids are like, they have figured out how to make androids basically out of people, so they are indistinguishable from people, but they have not really been accepted necessarily. So this girl is an android who was raised in like a compound basically, and her job is like a history android or something like that, but then she has to escape and run for her life, and she has to live among humans and pretend to not be an android, and things unroll from there. So this was very fun. I was frustrated by the lack of world building. This is the first in a trilogy, so it's possible that that does happen elsewhere, but I was very, very curious about why this world is the way that it is. Why are there androids? Why was there a great world war? All of these things, and none of that was answered for me. The romance was also incredibly cringy, but I am a very cringe-prone reader. So, yeah, I could talk more about this if anyone is interested, but I imagine most people are not. So in the comments, let me know if you are. I will just talk briefly about A Wrinkle in Time graphic novel. I reread this. This was the first full-length graphic novel that I ever read in Spanish, and so I reread it actually for a video for my other channel, which is about language learning. So you can watch that video, which is already up if you are interested. And lastly, we have the book that I may or may not have based my entire personality off of now. So before I talk about this, I do have to say this is a HarperCollins title. HarperCollins is on strike. They are the only unionized major publisher, and the company is refusing to negotiate with the union. They are asking for an increase in the minimum wage, which is extremely low for New York City, which is where you have to live to work there, from what I understand. So they are asking for that to go from $45,000 a year to $50,000 a year, which is still not that high. They are also asking for increased diversity, and I will put them on the screen because I have currently forgotten them, but they are being completely shut out by HarperCollins. I believe that from the posts that I read today, HarperCollins has actually hired temps to avoid bargaining with the union. So that is atrocious, absolutely horrific. But the union has said that they would like people to not boycott titles because that harms the authors, and they do not want to do that. So I will talk about this, but they have also requested that reviews be withheld. So while I absolutely do not imagine that HarperCollins is going to be using my words for any promotional purposes, I would just like to be clear that that is not something that I am consenting to. So, with no further ado, the book is Babel by R.F. Kuang. So, yes, I do in fact now own 3 copies of this book. I don't know what happened, but so I initially bought this special edition pre-order, and this is the one that I read this month, or last month, and absolutely rocked my world. Love this book. If you are on BookTok or Bookstagram, I think it made less of a splash on BookTube, but there have been very controversial reviews about this book written by white authors who say that it is racist against white people and I don't know about you, but to me, that's like the number one indicator that I should probably read a book. It's if it got white people's feathers all ruffled. And so I was actually saving this to read at Christmas and New Year's when I, get a day or two off. But that happened in like early December, and I pretty much immediately started reading this, and then I read it in like 2 days. And I cannot recommend this book enough. This is kind of sold as a dark academia. It's a light fantasy, not that the content is light, but that it's fantasy, but even if you don't like fantasy, don't be put off by the fantastical elements. It is primarily like historical, and it is about a young man who travels as a young boy from Canton in China to the UK in order to be prepared to study at Oxford and study translation. He is under like the care of this guardian who kind of prepares him academically, and then you follow him at Oxford where he studies at Babel, the Institute of Translation. And there is, a magical system that factors into this as well. So this is such an incredible book on literally every level. So I have been a big fan of R.F. Kuang, her entire career.
Hi everyone, I wrote one of HarperCollins' best-selling fiction titles this year. To be about the power of strikes and collective action.
I read the Poppy War series as it came out, which is something that I hardly ever do, and she is an auto-buy author for me 100%. I've already pre-ordered her new book, which by the way you can order through the union's bookshop.org, so that proceeds go to their, well, not all of the proceeds, but some of the proceeds go to their strike fund. But anyway, the Poppy War kind of throughout the series talks quite a bit about imperialism, about British imperialism, kind of as it crept into the East, specifically China. And this one just full-on tackles colonialism, imperialism, racism, classism, just such an impactful but also unique look at the effects of empire, through intellectual property, through the superiority complex of academia and the exploitation of academia, and how much that robs from the colonies and any other kind of country that they have the power to bully and push around. I found the characters really well done also. Really, I had almost no complaints about this book. Again, I'm a short book reader primarily, so this could have been 50 pages shorter. Like, it's not even hardly worth mentioning because it's so not important, but that's like the only thing I can think of. So I did promptly order this book in Spanish because it has been translated into Spanish, and I am immediately rereading it in Spanish. I'm almost 200 pages in. I paid more for this book than any other book in my entire collection, but it was well worth it. This is the cover without the thing. I love it so much. This is my most prized possession. And then when I was ordering that, they also had the UK edition, which is already out in paperback, and I prefer paperback so intensely, and when I reread this, I really want to like put tabs in it and post-its and make all kinds of notes and such. I don't write in my books, but I do like post-its and that sort of thing, and so I am already planning to reread this, and I'm going to reread this copy. So anyway, that was unnecessary, but I just have to justify why I have 3 copies. Anyway, that is the only book now that I own more than one edition of that's like 2 editions in English, you know, because that is not something that I normally do. So that should tell you everything that you need to know about how I feel about that book. I really honestly recommend everyone read that book. Like, if you are a literary reader, read the book. If you are a fantasy reader, read it. Like, this is going to go down in history. 100%. Anyway, my housekeeping things. I have several things that I would like to know moving forward with my channel, with my videos. I am very curious about whether people like it when I talk about, like, Spanish books. Like, if it's something that I would read in English, like Jane Eyre, then I feel fine about talking about it in my book videos. But sometimes I wonder whether things like this, things that I wouldn't read in English, whether people want me to include those in these videos. And if you don't want me to, absolutely feel free to say that. I will not be offended at all. Every time I make a video like this, I kind of question whether to put them in. The other thing related, I always pretty much just talk about books in the order that I read them, unless, like these, you know, if I read a whole series at once or books that are somehow related, I tend to put them together, but otherwise I tend to go through in the order that I read them. And I am curious whether people prefer that or prefer maybe split up by genres or put in order of least enjoyed to most enjoyed, or vice versa, or if you have any preference, I would love to know. I have seen people do wrap-ups in all kinds of different ways, and they pretty much all make sense to me. You know, putting them in time order is nice because you get a mix, but genre order is nice because you see, you know, things that make sense together. I don't know. Anyway, I'm very open to any suggestions or preferences, and also if you have anything that you'd like to see more in the future from this channel, from me, let me know. I am feeling moderately uninspired for BookTube because, to be honest, but videos just do so badly on here. It's, you know, very demotivating, and I hate to say that out loud in my videos because it comes across very much like I'm complaining, and I'm not. I absolutely 100% appreciate everyone who watches any of my videos, but I would be lying if I said that it was not demotivating to put hours and hours into videos that get, a couple dozen views. So I just, I would love to know what you guys would like to see more of, and I hope that your 2022 ended well and that your 2023 is starting well, and I will see you in the next video.